Hey everyone! So today, we're going to dive into a pretty passionate critique of modern fame. It's a look at a world where, according to one creator, the pressure to perform has gotten so intense that it's starting to blur the line between who celebrities really are and who they're just pretending to be.
And really, this whole thing boils down to one simple but powerful question. In this world where everyone can see everything, what is the actual price of fame? The creator we're following argues it's not just about losing your privacy, it's about maybe losing a piece of yourself along the way.
So, the creator we're talking about, Miss Weiwei, she makes this really personal. She's always wanted a family, but when she looks at the culture being shaped by celebrities today, she has to ask a really tough question. Is this a world she feels okay bringing kids into?
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with her personal crisis of hope, then get into her big celebrity case studies. After that, we'll look at her theory on the downfall of idols, the politics of it all, and wrap up with her final prayer for healing.
All right, so first up is this idea of a crisis of hope. The whole critique really kicks off with her own personal anxiety. She's looking at the online world and seeing a culture that she feels is just overwhelmingly sexualized, and for her, that feels like a direct threat to her own dreams of having a family one day.
And what's so fascinating here is the core conflict she's setting up. It's that traditional, timeless dream of being a mom, and it's clashing head-on with what she sees as the total chaos of the digital age. From her perspective, the message being blasted at young people is that success means being, in her words, naked or sexual. And that's a legacy she's not sure she wants her kids to inherit.
Now, to back this up, she doesn't just talk in general terms. No, she gets super specific, and she zeroes in on two of the absolute biggest names in pop culture right now, Addison Rae and Taylor Swift.
Okay, so let's start with Addison Rae. And just to give you an idea of the sheer scale we're talking about here, look at this number. Over 88 million followers on TikTok alone. I mean, that's not just fame. That's a whole media empire with a direct pipeline to a young and really impressionable audience.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures her point about how weird and impersonal this kind of fame is. She puts this huge digital number right next to the simple reality of having real friends, and it just highlights this massive disconnect that she finds really unsettling.
So her criticisms of Addison Rae get really specific. She points to things like smoking on stage, which she sees as just irresponsible, but also the accusations that she's copying Britney Spears and some of her more controversial political meetings. But really, it all comes down to this question of authenticity. The creator basically argues that Rae is trying to create a vibe rather than having a vibe. And this whole Britney Spears comparison, that brings her to a really sharp point. She sees these parallels being drawn, and she just asks why. Why would anyone choose to copy a life that, from her point of view, was so publicly destructive? She argues that the industry completely exploited Britney, and that is not a path anyone should want to follow.
So this isn't just about one person. It leads her to this bigger theory she has about what she calls the downfall of idols. She says there's this pattern, right, where these beloved child stars seem to go out of their way to destroy their wholesome image, and they often adopt what she calls a chaotic or even a demonic persona.
And this right here, it really lays it all out. She's talking about these huge transformations, like going from the innocent promise of Hannah Montana to the provocation of Wrecking Ball Miley, or from the sweet fairy tale love story Taylor to what she calls a man-hating Taylor. For her, this is a story the industry tells over and over again, and it's a troubling one.
And her take on Taylor Swift? Well, it follows that exact same pattern. She argues that Swift went from this relatable country girl to a much more sexualized image. She also says her music shifted, becoming full of what she calls themes of hate and jumping on trends like girl boss culture. To put it simply, in her view, Swift sold herself out.
But, and this is the huge but, you have to look at the reality of the situation. While this creator is critiquing Swift's journey, the commercial success is just mind-blowing. We're talking over 100 million certified album sales in the US alone. Swift's connection with her fans is undeniably powerful, which creates this really interesting tension between the critique and the massive public love. And of course, that level of success gives you incredible influence. And with that kind of influence, well, that's where she starts to look at the bigger picture, where celebrity and politics crash into each other. And it's here that she sees a major disconnect between what people say and what they actually do. So she throws out this direct challenge. She's basically saying, okay, if you're going to publicly align with a conservative figure, then where is your personal responsibility? She questions how that lines up with a lifestyle she sees as being all about, smoking on stage and taking your clothes off. And just so we're all on the same page, when she talks about conservative values, this is what she's referring to.
Things like personal responsibility, traditional family structures, and being a little skeptical of big, rapid social changes. She uses this as the foundation for her argument about hypocrisy.
So it all comes down to this question she's raising. Is this a huge contradiction? Do these public actions and these lifestyle choices totally undermine the very political values these celebrities say they support? It's a question she just kind of leaves hanging out there for us to think about.
All right, so after all that critique, she doesn't just leave it there. She ends with something else entirely. It's a hope, or maybe more like a prayer, for a way out of all the chaos.
What she really hopes for, not just for these celebs, but for everyone, is this idea of making a conscious choice to reject chaos and instead choose stability, to move toward a life that's more grounded, more peaceful, and, in her own words, more wholesome. And she actually paints a really clear picture of what that healing could look like. It all starts with getting back to basics, like having your own ranch.
Planting your own veggie patches, building a life that's actually rooted in something real, something connected to the earth.
But it's not just about the physical stuff. It all leads to something much deeper. A prayer for people to get back to a place where they have a soul in their body and a light in their eyes. A life of real inner peace without the constant need to perform for an audience.
And that leaves us with this one last thing to think about. The creator points out that a stable, mature life is often dismissed as boring in today's culture. But after hearing her whole argument, you have to wonder, in a world that feels like it's getting more and more chaotic, maybe that boring stability is actually the most radical and appealing thing to hope for.